We can begin now. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I think we can get going now. I'm Jessica McGlynn. I'm the Corporate Engagement Lead for the Science Based Targets Network, and we'd like to welcome you to our webinar to share some of the work we're doing on science-based targets for nature. And on behalf of our organization, we'd like to extend our warmest wishes to all of those who are observing the holy month of Ramadan, Ramadan Kareem. I'd like to take this moment to thank our co-sponsors for today's webinar, which include the Biodiversity Consultancy, the Convention for Biological Diversity, the Global Partnership for Business and Biodiversity, CDP, IDH, World Wildlife Fund's Indonesia and Malaysia offices, the World Resources Institute for Indonesia, and the Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development. Thank you all for co-sponsoring this event. Next. A couple of points to note before we begin. We'd like you to please rename yourself on the participant list using your first name and the name of your organization so that we know who's on the line. And you'll see some examples that we put in for ourselves. We also wanted you to know that the webinar is going to be recorded and that the recording is going to be posted on the SBTN website and sent to all of you in a follow-up email. We ask that you please keep your mic muted until the Q&A section of the presentation. And if you do have any questions as we present the material, please put your questions in the chat box and we'll either answer those questions as we go or we'll answer them in the Q&A at the end of our presentation. Next. It's an honor to present the other speakers for today's webinar. This is Tammy Putri from the Biodiversity Consultancy and Fitrion Ardiancha from IDH. And I'm going to hand it over to Fitrion now.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, everyone. Hi, good morning to all of you. My name is Fitrion. I'm the Global Envoy for Nature-Based Solutions for IDH Sustainable Trade Initiative. IDH in this SBTN helps the outreach of SBT network to our corporate partners. And we work in partnership with our partners to develop and execute prototypes that will contribute to SBT for nature. So as you can see in the agenda, we're going to share with you what are the science-based targets and what is SBTN. And of course, it will be continue about the why and how to take actions with regard to SBTN. And Tommy will explain about that. And to conclude, Jess will then wrap it up to share with you about how for you to join the global movement. Next, please. Next. So as you can see, it is clear that we are facing nature crisis as large as the climate crisis, and the two are really connected. The last report of the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBES, the biodiversity equivalent of the IPCC climate, tell us that 1 million species are at risk of extinctions. So there has been 60% decline in species populations over the past 40 years at the global level. Human activity, as you may have known, has substantially modified over 50% of the Earth's land. And 95% of the land shows some signs of human modifications. With this, of course, it has really impacted our life and our businesses. So we are increasingly understanding the extent to which nature and biodiversity is foundational to human health and well-being, and to also a thriving economy. For example, I can share with you some data coming from the World Economic Forum. They mentions that $44 trillion of economic value generations, or around half of the world's total GDP, is moderately or highly dependent on nature and its services. So it is clear that biodiversity loss and climate change will really impact on or having risk to our global economic activities. So we can't solve the climate crisis without solving nature loss. The two are the same flip sides of the same coin. So tropical deforestation causes more greenhouse gas emissions per year and also quite significant. Next, please. So in our view, there is an urgent need for all of us, companies, different organizations, cities, nations, individuals, to take collective actions based on the best available science to ensure that we keep our planet within a self-operating space for humanity, and ensure a sustainable and prosperous future for ourselves and for future generations. We in the private sector and individual organizations are challenged and should be also part of these solutions. But of course, this raises questions. As a company, what should I do and where, and how much is enough? And this is where the concept of science-based targets comes in. Next, please. So, as you can see, before we go any further, I would like to give a working definitions of science-based targets to ensure that we are all starting from a common point of understanding, as the term of SBT or science-based targets is sometimes used in different ways in different contexts. So science-based targets are measurable, actionable, and evidence-based targets for individual companies that are aligned with societal environmental sustainability goals. So we are creating methods for cities too. If you feel it is relevant to mention for government stakeholders, please feel free also to share with them. Next, please. The climate and nature crisis are fundamentally interconnected, as I mentioned earlier. Neither issues can be solved without actions on the other. The best known science-based target is, of course, science-based targets for climate, set through the SBT initiative. In the case of SBTs for climate, for societal goal, the answers to how much is enough at the global scale is set by a relatively 1.5 degrees target under the Paris Agreements. Since 2015, approaches have been developed that allow the global 1.5 degrees goal to be disaggregated, into company-specific emission targets that define what each company's fair share is of meeting the global climate goal. So for almost 1,000 companies with a combined market capitalizations of around 15 trillion US dollar, 15, are setting targets through SBTI. For our perspective, the world's largest stock exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, has market cap of $20 trillion. So it's quite significant having these 1,000 companies. So the equivalent approaches, from global target, translated into a local context, and then local target, and then of course to company allocations, are now being developed that will allow companies to set science-based targets for all aspects of nature. So not just climate, which is what we will be introducing today. So companies, in our view, need to align their targets to these science-based global goals. And the primary mechanism to do so are through an emerging standard from SBTI on the net zero and guidance from SBTN on nature positives. Next, please. So why SBT? Why science-based target? We believe that the first and foremost is this would give companies and others credibility, because this is being developed and has been developed and will be developed further in partnership with the Global Commons Alliance, supported by over 45 international NGOs, donors, scientific organizations, and business coalitions. And then if it's adopted by leading sustainability coalitions in various industry sectors and over 60 global businesses, it will also give good credibility not only in your sector, but also across sectors and across industry all over the world. Next, please. So as you can see, who is the Global Commons Alliance? It is a network of organizations, businesses and governments aiming to positively transform the world's economic systems and protect the global commons. So together, we identify for the first time a safe and just corridor for humanity. That's the work of the Earth Commissions. In addition, we are now in a position to provide science-based targets to all global commons for all companies and cities in the world. We also have an ally in powerful new media channels that can reach millions of people in many different sectors. And lastly, we can work together to create systems that enable rapid actions at scale across cities, companies, and societies, but also hold all of us accountable. Next, please. So who we are, as you can see, SBTN, SBT network builds off SBTI. The broad memberships of the network itself roughly 45 plus partners, illustrates a widespread agreement among environmental organizations, businesses, scientists on the need for a single unified message for business to provide clarify on how to ensure efforts they are scientifically validated. SBT's vision is a global economy in which companies and cities operate within environmental boundaries on socially equitable basis through the setting of science-based targets to transform their impact. Next, please. So, as you can see, we also have the connections with different coalitions and all different platforms or different standards. Textile Exchange, for instance, is associating and working closely with SBTN, Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials Associations, or RSP, International Platform for Insetting, Should Commissioners for England, OP2B, the Fashion Pact, Karma Blue Capital, among others. Next, please. You can also see in this slide that these companies and partners have already joined the SBTN Corporate Engagement Program, which we think that they recognize the importance of taking actions today and also in the future, and towards setting a science-based target for nature. Next, please. So this is just an example of some testimony coming from one of the corporate partners of SBTN. Next, please. So other reasons why SBTs, so science-based targets, are important. I think this would also provide communication alignment, given that targets companies can set are explicitly aligned with global societal frameworks for actions. SBTs can be used to quickly communicate which issues you are contributing toward resolving, for instance, land and sea use change, marine and freshwater resource exploitations. SBTNs also, especially the indicator framework, will help ensure you are measuring the right indicators and able to assess how this contributes toward your desired outcome. Another reason is, of course, this could also provide you controlled trade-offs and increased co-benefits. A key advantage of integrated science-based targets is that they are being designed to recognize the interconnections of issues areas and thus allow you to take actions on multiple issues at once and not create new problems, hopefully. Last but not least, it will also expectedly consolidate it and having practical approach. So building on existing sustainability tools that your companies most likely are doing right now, and also approaches and platforms. So this is a pathway to achieve nature positive future. Next, please. So there is no doubt that nature positive has become a very popular term over the past year. So industry bodies such as the World Economic Forum and Business for Nature have released publications championing a nature positive approach. The upcoming CBD COP15 in China and Biden Climate Summit, which is going to be held tomorrow, will spark huge interest from the private sector to take bold actions on nature positive solutions. But how do we ensure that it delivers tangible, demonstrable, and positive outcomes for the natural world and doesn't become just another, buzzword, sustainability buzzword without any real substance? So, in our view, pledging to become nature positive means aligning with society's goal for biodiversity and climate. So both needs to be combined. At the level of individual company, this means going beyond only impact reductions. It means not only reducing your direct impacts on nature and the impacts in your supply chains. It also means compensation to some extent for your residual impacts. It means committing to contribute and do your fair share of the positive actions to restore and regenerate. So it is important to restore and regenerate nature and meet our global biodiversity goals. It means considering how we can transform our business model to remove impacts at root. So SBTN can drive nature positive transitions by helping companies to see their role in environmental change, either negative and positive, in relation to other actors, and set targets in line with what nature needs and contribute towards large-scale transitions. Science-based targets offer also a science-based methodology to support your nature positive journey. consolidating your existing commitments, policy, and actions across various issues towards answering how much is enough. By enabling measurements of your contributions, SBTN also offers an action framework, the ARRT, that can help you in focusing your efforts and tackle multiple issues from biodiversity to land to oceans and climate change. So this is really integrated solutions. We will be discussing the ARRT framework in more detail with a later slide. Then I'll give the floor to Tami. Over to you, Tami.
Right. Thank you so much, Mas Fitrian. Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here today. I'd like to introduce myself first and my organization. My name is Tami Putri. I am a principal consultant at the Biodiversity Consultancy. We are a small consultancy specializing in biodiversity risk management based in Cambridge in the UK. And as part of the SBT network, TBC, along with IUCN, co-lead the Biodiversity Hub. And we are also one of the co-authors of this initial guidance for business that I'm about to introduce to you today. So let's begin. Thank you, Mas Fitrian, for taking us through the concepts and context of where SBTs for Nature comes from. Now, I would like to take you through what you as businesses can do today on taking no regret actions and set yourself up in the right direction on addressing nature loss. But before we move ahead, I'd like to emphasize again that SBT for Nature is a work in progress. We are still working out some fundamental questions, but you'll be able to see in the technical appendices of this initial guidance document some of our initial thinking. For example, we still have homework to do in answering questions such as how do we prioritize, allocate, and define target boundaries for a safe and just operating space at the company level? We're working hard to provide answers to these questions, and we would like you, businesses, companies, to help us. And we're also aiming to complete the methods and standardized guidance in 2022. Next, please. So before we move ahead, I'd like to take a step back and really introduce the science behind SBT. So there's the word science behind the SBT term, but what does it actually really mean? Well, SBT for natures are really based on the safe operating space concept, like Mas Fitrian has explained earlier. So back in 2009, leading scientists proposed some quantitative planetary boundaries within which humanity can continue to develop and thrive for generations to come. Adjusted to account for social and economic development dimensions, these safe and just operating space are what we rely on to ensure our economic systems, our way of life essentially, can thrive in the future. Scientists have estimated that we've already crossed the boundaries for climate, biodiversity, phosphorus, and nitrogen, as well as land systems. So 4 out of these 9 systems. These are quantified limits, essentially, to stay within that all of us need to work towards. And this is also what drives the UN-led global policy processes in determining the global goals for nature. So, for example, like Mas Vichyan has explained, through the Paris Agreement, we have established the 1.5 degrees Celsius as a global goal for climate. But what is the equivalent of this for nature? The short answer to that is we don't know for sure yet, because the global goals for nature, most notably the UN CBD post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, is still in process, still being negotiated. But we are expecting that these will be decided upon very soon as this year, 2021, which is why we think it's a very good time for businesses to prepare yourself, consolidate what you're doing right now, and evaluate that you are ready to align with science and align with this upcoming society's goals on nature as well. Next, please. So how can the interim guidance help? The interim guidance is really designed to help companies apply some key steps that you can take to reverse nature loss based on science and again align with society's goals on nature. The targets and the target setting processes themselves specifically address these key drivers and pressures that you see on the screen. We know that based on the IPBES global assessment, that the decline of the state of nature and nature's contribution to people across three realms, land, fresh water, and oceans, were the results of five key pressures: land, water, sea use change, resource exploitation, climate change, pollution, and invasive species threats. These pressures have resulted from drivers of socio-economic pressures, including the way we do business, production and consumption patterns, such as fast fashion, food waste, population growth, trade relationship, for example, outsourcing environmentally harmful production processes, technological innovations, such as the rise of e-commerce, and systems of governance and social institutions like those that govern access to and ownership over natural resources. Next, please. So the interim guidance provides you with a solid pathway for businesses to set targets and take actions across these three realms: land, fresh water, oceans, addressing those key drivers and pressures on nature loss, as you can see here on the diagram on the right-hand side. Many businesses, we acknowledge, have already making significant advance, even progress in addressing their environmental impacts. So in this instance, SBTN really wants to help you consolidate your cross-cutting efforts on sustainability and offer you a lens to evaluate how much you've achieved so far with your existing initiatives and how much more you should aim to tackle in the near future, and where and how. The SBTN proposes high-level target across these realms, addressing these key pressures on nature to be covered by corporate science-based targets. These target categories would, of course, directly correspond to more specific issues areas, which will be unique to each business, which will be unique to each value chain. We also takes aim at the state of nature itself. So as part of the SBTN method, there will be measurement frameworks for species, ecosystem, and nature's contributions to people. Later, when the global goals are established, the SBTN method will be adjusted to ensure that companies that do apply the methods will be aligned with global targets, including the UNCBD post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, the UNCCD 2018 to 2030 Strategic Framework with the goal of land degradation neutrality, UNFCCC Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and the UNGA's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Next, please. So our recent interim guidance that was just issued in September 2020 is really aimed at helping your company or your business answer this overarching question. What can you do today to start aligning with science to ensure you're doing your part in 2021 and onward for an equitable, net zero, nature positive future? How do you do this? How do you set SBTs for nature? There are more information of this in the guidance, of course, but I would like to just touch base on these key five key step processes. So companies can follow these 5 steps to supplement your current strategy, not to completely substitute it, not to reinvent the wheel, but to supplement your current strategy for addressing environmental issues, or if you haven't started your journey yet, to begin exploring these issues for the first time. So the first step to begin, you gather or supplement existing data to estimate your value chain-wide impacts and dependency on nature. The output is a list of potential issue areas and locations for target setting. We understand that many companies have already done some version of materiality impact or value chain mapping. For example, using the natural capital protocol. And in this instance, you can use this guidance to check where there might be any geographic or issues gaps that needs addressing. So the first step is really you conducting materiality assessment and mapping the value chain. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say next. Please, Sarah. Thank you. Yeah, so the first step, let me just rewind a little bit. The first step is really for you to conduct materiality assessment and map the value chain. Now, after you've done this, the second step is, of course, interpreting the results of this step one, prioritizing key issues and locations for taking actions. You will consider actions across different sphere of influence, from your operations to the landscape surrounding your value chain. Next, third step is collecting the baseline data for prioritized targets and location. Using the data from this and from previous steps, you can set targets aligned with Earth's limits and society's goals and disclose this publicly. Many companies have set targets and they are refreshing them now, and therefore can use methods such as the SBTN to enable them to set the right targets in the right areas, on par with what being discussed as global nature goals. Once targets are set, so the four steps, of course, we need to take action. So utilizing the SBTN action framework, the ARRT framework, avoid, reduce, regenerate, restore, transform, to make a plan, to make an action plan and begin to address your contribution towards the unsustainable use and loss of nature. And the fifth step is, of course, monitoring your progress towards your targets and reporting publicly on this progress. Next, please. Delving in more detail on the ARRT framework or the SBTN's action framework. So the SBT for Nature is not only looking to help you set measurable, actionable, time-bound objectives on nature, but through this action framework, we are also wanting to help streamline corporate efforts in reversing nature loss. So the ARRT framework is based on the mitigation hierarchy, or sometimes also known as the conservation hierarchy. It's an internationally recognized best practice framework for managing biodiversity risk, adopted by many financial institutions and global companies worldwide. We have extended these hierarchies to cover transformative action, which is a new element here that covers the way companies can contribute to needed systemic change inside and outside your value chain. This contribution toward positive change is shown as the circle surrounding the process of minimizing, eliminating, and making up for negative impacts. So the ARRT, the first letter A stands for avoid, preventing impact happening in the first place, eliminating impact entirely. And in the context of new or potential impacts here, you can do this by applying spatial, technological, or temporal approaches. For example, for a corporate value chain, you're committing to not develop within internationally recognized areas of biological importance, or if you're in the fashion sector, exclusively using regenerated cellulose fibers from post-consumer cotton waste instead of newly harvested cotton, and many other examples. The first R stands for reduce, which really is about minimizing impacts from a baseline value, but not eliminating them entirely. You can do this by adjusting how you produce your products and goods and services. So production process changes, or adjusting the design of your product, establishing product stewardship, changing your business model, or engaging with your sourcing partner or your suppliers as well. The two last R's, regenerate and restore. Regenerate means actions designed within existing land uses to increase the biophysical function or ecological productivity of an ecosystem and its components, often with a focus on specific desirable nature's contribution to people. For example, you want to boost food production, you want to increase nitrogen or phosphorus retention in regenerative agriculture, or carbon sequestration. So these are examples of nature's contributions to people. While restore means initiate or accelerate the recovery of an ecosystem with respect to its health, integrity, and sustainability, with a focus on permanent changes in state. So it's really restoring nature back to its original natural condition. So the science really behind regenerations and restoration is rapidly evolving. So guidance for companies seeking to participate in these activities should approach target setting really with flexibility and willingness to adapt. But some of the example actions you can take on regeneration and restoration include, for example, ecological restoration or supporting individual species recovery, regenerative agriculture, aquaculture, or agroecology, or even compensatory conservation or target-based ecological compensation. These are just some examples on regeneration and restoration approaches. Last but not least is the T, or transform, which really means the actions contributing to system-wide change, notably the drivers of nature loss, through, for example, technological, economic, institutional, and social factors, and changes in underlying values and behaviors. The science is really clear. In order for us to avoid runaway climate change and irrecoverable nature loss while meeting development goals, we as a society must begin to transition or transform entirely the systems that give structure to our world. Now, businesses have a key role to play in these transformations. Not only can you contribute by transforming your business models and the way you value nature, but you can also create new partnerships across supply chains and sectors. You can invest in the landscapes and seascapes where you operate, and critically, you can help lobby the government to raise its policy ambition for nature and climate change. It is really the SBTN goal to work with companies such as yourselves on co-designing the methods via our corporate engagement program that later Jess will be discussing. We want to create methods that are cost effective, user friendly, and align with what you're already doing as much as possible. Next. So let's get started today. You can get started today by taking actions on nature and set these interim targets. These are examples of interim targets. There are many other interim targets encompassing a wider range of topic in the interim guidance document. These are just an example of that. So even though the SBTN methods are still being developed, businesses can take action now, building on the existing initiatives and programs you already have today. So, for example, you can start by setting the interim target for land use change by committing to reduce to a certain figure by 2030 activities causing deforestation or conversion in your supply chain. And when setting such an interim target, the ambition guidance or basis to which set your ambition level that you desire or you wanna go toward, you can use, for example, the zero deforestation from 2020 or the zero conversion of natural habitats in value chain by 2030, following the accountability framework initiatives. Or for those of you that comes from the financial institutions background, maybe this is more familiar to you. Following the IFC Performance Standard 6 on biodiversity conservation, the target of no net loss of non-forest natural habitats from 2020 onwards. So when setting this sort of target guided by this ambition level, you can use indicators such as area size or hectares of deforestation and conversion of natural ecosystems that are avoided, for example. And we understand that many of your companies have already begun setting these interim targets. This is really an example how we are trying to build on your current initiatives and your programs. We have, wherever possible, we have attempted to align indicators and the target measurements in the method so far with existing corporate practices. So those who have already done substantial work, for example, with the no deforestation policy, scope 3 GHG assessment, natural capital assessment, or even reporting using CDP, GRI, or SASB frameworks, can really draw on the information you've collected so far in order to get started with SBT. So you don't need to, we're not reinventing the wheel here. You don't need to completely start from zero, from scratch. So later, each of the issues areas that you are seeing here ultimately will have their own methods when we're done with the guidance, and this will include cross-cutting issues as well, such as biodiversity. Right now, our teams are working very hard on what these targets will look like, and we will hopefully have more information on this by the end of this year, so at the end of 2021. So yeah, with that, I'd like to give back the floor to Jess. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Tammy. So as we've mentioned, our methods are not ready yet. They will be ready at the end of next year. But we are offering companies, consultants, financial institutions, and industry coalitions an opportunity to work with us right now to co-design our methods and tools and to get ready to set a science-based target for nature. We want to make sure that what we're creating actually works for you and fits with how you do your business now. And we'd like a representative group of companies to work with us. And we showed you a slide of the companies earlier today that are working with us. You probably noticed that many of them are based in North America and Europe, and we would like to expand that so that we have companies that are based in Southeast Asia as well, working with us right now to give us feedback so that what we create works for you as well. Next. We do think it's helpful for companies to get ready now, even though the methods aren't ready, because it's going to take time to socialize this concept within your company, with your leadership, and it's going to take time to collect the data to, for example, do step 1. And we're seeing already, even though our methods are not ready yet, that organizations are signaling that they're going to be integrating SBTs for nature into their platforms and expectations of companies. So for example, you see here a quote from WBCSD. WBCSD has recently announced that they are going to require their members to set SBTs for nature when they're ready next year. So that's just one example of many that we're starting to see in the market of organizations starting to integrate this concept into their expectations. Next. So that is why we have this corporate engagement program, which we've mentioned before. And I wanted to give you a little bit of maybe some rationale if you're interested in joining. Here's some benefits for joining. This will allow you as a company to give us direct feedback into our draft tools and our methods so that what we develop is, as we already mentioned, cost effective and user friendly and aligned with what you're doing as much as we can make that happen. We also provide an opportunity for you to ask questions of our technical team as you start to prepare to set SBTs. So for example, we have been working closely with our corporate engagement program on step 1, which is the value chain and materiality impact assessment step. And we've been asking for feedback from the companies in our program on the guidance, how good or how not good it is in helping the companies to do step 1. And through their feedback, we are iterating and revising our guidance directly from their feedback. So that's an example of how you can influence what we're doing. Another great thing about joining our corporate engagement program is that you can learn from other companies about what they're doing to prepare to set science-based targets for nature. We have monthly learning sessions where we allow companies to present some of the work they're doing on the various steps and to learn from other companies what they're doing, which I think is pretty valuable. Next. We designed this program to be pretty flexible. We know that you don't have a lot of time. You're probably involved in a lot of different programs. So really the basic requirements for being part of this program are to give us feedback on our guidance, which is on our website, and then to do step 1 on some part of your business. So do value chain or materiality impact on a product that your company has, on a business line, whatever you feel comfortable doing, so that you can begin to get acquainted with what will be expected, and that, again, that you can give us feedback on what's working and what's not working in our guidance. And if you're interested in learning more about the program, I've seen a lot of interest on the chat. Please do email me after this webinar, and I'm happy to send you more information and talk to you and your team about what we're up to. And with that, I think that is the end of our slides. So we can take a few questions now if we haven't already answered them in the chat. Rachel? Any questions coming up?
Yeah, we have one that just came in through the chat. So is there a route for independent consultants to collaborate?
Yes, so we have invited consultants to join our program as well. And we have many consultants that are part of our corporate engagement program. We also have invited industry coalitions. So for example, Textile Exchange is part of our group, and they're giving us great feedback, and they're coming to all our sessions. And recently we've added the opportunity for financial institutions to join our program. And Bank of America, Church of England was the first financial institution to join. And I see many banks are on this webinar today. So if that's of interest, we'd love to have you also.
Jess, could you just give a few examples of the learning opportunities that we've offered in the past couple months?
Yes, so we have monthly sessions, and the sessions are with our technical team. And in those sessions, we are either getting feedback on a piece of our guidance. So we did some feedback on step 1 and 2, or we use the session for the companies themselves to ask us questions that we have not yet answered. And we have a members only corporate engagement program website where we are creating a very extensive technical FAQ. So as we continue to get new questions and answer them, we provide answers for the companies on that website.
So I think Jess and Tammy, the last questions now coming from an audience. I think one of my good old friends here is Kiasari or Kiki. She asked about, how this SBT aligned with other initiatives. I mean, before this event, many people also have approached me. Is this something new? I mean, do we have to do additional work after doing RSPO, FSC, and many other different standards? So maybe you can, enlighten us, Jess, and perhaps Tammy as well.
Yeah, so like we said over and over, we are trying to align with what's out there. And at the same time, we have a lot of questions that we're trying to ask of a scientific nature that we're working with the Earth Commission on. So we didn't mention the Earth Commission in detail, but the Earth Commission is led by Johan Rockström and Joita Gupta, and they're helping us to define what a safe and just operating space is for individual actors, so for companies and for cities. And we have a lot of questions, honestly, that we're still answering. So even some basic questions about how do you prioritize impacts? How do you create targets that have integrated co-benefits? What indicators should you even be measuring? These are questions that we're still answering. However, we do have a very strong sense about how we're going to line up with things that are already out there. So for example, I know many of you are certified in something. You have either palm oil certified with RSPO, or you have FSC certified wood, which is awesome. Like, certification is a great way of addressing your impacts within your supply chain and reducing your impacts. And so we will find a way of acknowledging that within our science-based targets. However, we have this step called transform that's in that action step that we showed you, the ART framework, and that is will be a requirement to take action outside of your individual supply chain to do something at a systems level to transform the system. So that's just one small example of where there's connections and where there may be additional work required.
Yeah, again, maybe I would like to, Jess, I would like to add, and perhaps Tammy can add much more. I think the uniqueness of SBT for nature, in my view, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is not only about avoiding or mitigating impacts or reductions of impact or risk, but what I really like, it's about also aligning ourselves to become nature positive. So meaning that we need to also, like you just mentioned correctly, transforming the companies, transforming our economic activities, also to contribute to positive actions, including to restore and regenerate nature and meet our biodiversity and nature goals. That's probably one of my point of view in terms of the uniqueness of SBT for natures. But perhaps Tami and perhaps you also just can help.
Yeah, so for me, thank you so much, Jess and Masvichan. So for me personally, the way I see it, of course, these certifications are a very important part of the ARRT action framework based on that we just discussed today. So these certifications typically are aimed to reducing your impacts. So it can fit within the first R, or it can fit in the T, the transformative part of the ARRT as well. But the SBTN framework goes beyond that. So that's definitely a part of the actions that make up the SBTN method. But we are aiming to have actions just beyond the supply chain, doing more than just reducing your impacts. And one of the key thing that I see SBTN really adds value on is really the measurement framework. So how do we know that we've done enough with our certifications, with our NDP policy, and etc., and the other initiatives you might have? How do we know that it's enough compared to our impacts on the landscape and seascape that we're operating in from our supply chain? So this is where SBTN comes really handy, because it gives you a lens through the measurement framework, through the 5-step process, to really evaluate as well how far you've come, how much you've, in terms of quantitative contributions, quantification, how much you've achieved and how much more you need to go and tackle in the near future. So for me, the measurement framework is really what the SBTN method is going to really help companies with.
Rachel, any other questions?
Nope, it looks like we have addressed all of them.
Well, excellent. Can you elaborate more on how transformation at system level are done within a large landscape context? Yes, that's an excellent question. Like, how can we transform at a landscape level? We are working on that right now. Our Land Hub will be doing a couple of pilots later on this year to test this idea out. In terms of just some big picture issues, I think from the transformation step in that ART framework will include things like advocating for enabling policy, or working across the supply chain to incentivize, sustainable agroforestry, for example. So these are things that can be done as a group, but we have not yet worked out the details of how exactly it's going to work at a landscape level, working with multiple actors, and we will be piloting that towards the end of this year.
Just can I say that this is also a good opportunity for companies, especially in this region in Southeast Asia, to be part of this, process or efforts, so that they can also contribute to answering what sort of transformations needed at systemic level or at landscape level, building on their experience, having their expertise, and contributing back to the discussions at the global level. What do you reckon?
Yep, totally agree. We really want to hear from the companies your good ideas. That's one of the other reasons we set up the corporate engagement program. Rather than us telling you what to do, we wanted to hear from you all your good ideas about this. I'm sure many of your companies have already been thinking about this for a long time and have some great insight into this very complicated set of issues. So we would love to hear from you. So again, encouraging you to join the corporate engagement program, and would love to chat with you offline if you're interested in that.
Yeah, I can think of many initiatives already from the region and working towards landscape scale initiative. So I know that a company is working on landscape level sustainable land use planning, for example, or even IDH yourself. What, Mas Fitran, you have your verified sourcing area approach, which uses a jurisdictional approach on setting a common goal for managing productive landscapes, whilst balancing the need for conservation, for production, as well as for protection, and also including the smallholders or the social targets as well. So I know for sure from my work that there are so many existing initiatives already out there in this region for landscape level transformative actions. But the key is to really work with the stakeholders. For example, you can work with your stakeholders, multi-stakeholders in your landscape towards a common sustainable goal. So really streamlining that what everyone's doing to optimize our progress in achieving certain sustainability goals, be it sustainable commodities, be it conservation of certain species, certain wide-ranging species, for example. So yeah, these type of things. We would love to hear from you, would like to capture what's already out there so that we can learn from each other. So peer-to-peer learning is also what we are trying to do with SBTN.
In that case, Tommy and Jess, I got an idea. Call this a wild idea, but I think there's certain, high level of or high degree of interest coming from companies or organizations in this region, and they have done quite a lot. And it would be good, I think, let's say the next event that SBTN is going to do in this region, also to connect those dots, meaning that the discussions at the global level with certain degrees of technical elements would be then connected to the experience on the ground, and then the exchange can be done, can be facilitated. So I think that will be quite crucial to also get companies not only to join, but also to really do some sort of prototyping and also trial what they think is the right thing to do, but also connecting this to the global level discussions.
I agree. We did something like this. Our land team in the Atlantic Forest of Brazil, WWF, led this, trying to take the local to global approach and see how that might work. And the report will be coming out shortly, so I can share that with everyone. But yes, I think that's an excellent idea. We know that there's a lot of challenges around downscaling from global down, and it probably won't work completely. So we need to look at bottom up also and grassroots and see how to connect them, just like you're saying. So yeah, completely agree with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. I want to thank our panelists today. They were wonderful, Fitrion and Tammy. I want to thank all our co-sponsors for joining us, and all you participants for turning out this morning and being so participative. We really appreciate your questions and your interest, and would love to keep the conversation going with you. So please do contact any one of us if you'd like to discuss more and how you might get engaged. And thanks again. And again, happy Ramadan to all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Selamat Ramadan.